Hey everyone, it's Jack. With season 17 starting to air with an incredible premiere, I don't think there's any better time than now to rank every single premiere of Drag Race US. Drag Race is such a unique show because I feel like other reality competition shows have their premieres overshadowed as the season goes on. While on Drag Race, the premiere episode has a lasting impact on the season up until the winner is crowned. You often see the finalists get their first win here, everyone's in the same workroom on the same playing field, no one has any track record or any bottom placements yet. The people at Drag Race just know how to start a season and look no further than season 17's opening. So today I want to go over each of the premieres and rank them, and I want to set a little bit of guidelines. If there's a split premiere, I'm only doing episode 1. For example, season 12, I'm only doing I'm That Bitch and not You Don't Know Me. To me, if someone is announced a winner, that means that the episode is finished. So while we're on this, in the same realm, I am going to be counting episodes 1 and 2 of season 15. Partially because no movement was made in the competition after episode 1, and back in 2023, the episodes aired back to back on the same night, so it's basically like one big episode. Comment below what you think is going to be on top and what's going to be in last place. If you think about it for just a second, you probably can tell what's going to be in last place. Make sure you like and subscribe. Happy New Year. I hope y'all are having a great holiday. And let's dig into some pork chops at the loading dock. Season 13's premiere is ranked in last place by a pretty wide margin. This is not only one of the worst premieres we've ever had, it's also just one of, if not the worst episode of Drag Race I've ever seen. In every way, this episode does things wrong. For those who need a refresher, this was the first season back after the pandemic, and they decided to open the season with pairs of queens lip syncing against each other, with the winners staying in the competition and going to the workroom, while the losers went to the pork chop loading dock. The queens of the pork chop loading dock just had to sit there until each of the lip syncs was finished, with the entire time thinking that they might be actually getting eliminated on the first episode within the first 5 minutes of them being there. Even for the people who knew TV a little better and knew that there was probably not gonna happen, at the end of the episode they were told that they had to vote someone out of the group, and it was framed like that person was getting eliminated. It overall was just a really mentally terrible thing to do for queens who were just coming into a competition. In the middle of the pandemic, mind you, things weren't that opened up when they started filming this. The crazy part is, after all of these mind games, it didn't even pay off into anything. They really tried to force this winners and losers circle into the show, and then after Lala Ree got eliminated, they just kind of dropped everything. And just on an entertainment level, I don't think this episode provides a lot. The constant start and stop and re-entering the workroom and the queens being confused and then going to the main stage, it happened 5 or 6 times with no break to the format. And even as a seasoned Drag Race watcher, it wasn't really holding my attention that well. And at the time, I tried to get multiple people into Drag Race and they just wanted to watch the most recent season. But after showing them this premiere, they just weren't hooked in the proper way. It's confusing for new viewers, it's a repetitive watch for old viewers, and for the queens themselves, it just was not a good time. At number 25, I actually have a question for you. What happened in the All Stars 8 premiere? If you remember what happened in this premiere, congratulations, because I feel like a lot of people don't. Now, this premiere and basically every other entry on this list has not done something nearly as bad as the season 13's premiere. This premiere, much like the rest of the season, is just so insanely forgettable. The one highlight that we get is the incredible lip sync at the end of the episode between Aja and Kahana, but it truly is a chore to get to that moment. It completely feels like the shell of Drag Race without anything they really want to say. There's a runway mini challenge with some cool looks, but nothing has really stood the test of time. The girl group's song and performance have also not stood the test of time, with the song specifically having some of the worst mixing of the show they've ever had. It was the first Drag Race season where I really feel like they were just going through the emotions to get a season out to meet a quota. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but just the lack of lasting impact cannot go understated about this season, with the premiere being the first example. Out of this episode, I remember Freakum Dress, Kahana's performance, Monica's performance because it's just really iconically interesting, Lala and Darian's present look, Jimbo's past look, and that's about it. I can't really think of anything else. And you may think that's a lot, but all of that combined is only about 4 minutes of the entire 60-minute episode. The heart wasn't there, and it's just become a season that a lot of people want to forget. If All Stars 8 had a lack of energy throughout the whole season and in the premiere, season 10 has a really frantic energy as they're pulling every trick in the book to try and recreate what season 9 had. Now let me reiterate, I find a lot of these premiere episodes really good. And though I think season 10's has a lot of problems, there's still stuff that I do enjoy about it. I love the mini challenge that they did where they were dancing in front of a bunch of Drag Race alumni, and the theme of the design challenge being drag on a dime is just a theme that's always gonna work whatever season it appears on. What makes this season rank this low is that it was planting a lot of the seeds for later on to show that it wasn't gonna be the most honest season. A couple of the placements in the judging was just super weird. A big big example being Mo Hart, who made this incredible card dress with some incredible makeup and was just called safe. While I do think Mayhem's look was great and could definitely be justified for the win, Mo Hart not even being acknowledged for this incredible work that she did was just a very interesting choice. We also have the extremely targeted judging of Dusty Ray Bottom's dots on her face. Without even missing a beat, not even seeing a single other look, Michelle already clocked the dots and said that she didn't like them. And that critique followed Dusty for the rest of the season. I think the placements just really telegraphed who they were prioritizing this season, and seeing this type of stuff in episode 1, especially with hindsight of where the season went, it's just not a good payoff at all. And another payoff that we didn't get from this first episode is the Cracker and Aquaria drama. And while they were both queens who were very notable in the New York space, and them being cast together just out of random based off their talents could have happened, I think there was a deliberate choice in casting these two together to try and get like a Coco and Alyssa situation, and the storyline went nowhere in the episode and for the rest of the season. Everything about the episode is retreading something that has already happened. Drag on a Dime is the only one that I will praise. Like I said, I really like this challenge and it's entertaining anytime it happens, and this was a very conscious choice of them doing the first ever challenge once again. But then we also had the celebrity entrance of Christina Aguilera, which just didn't have the same punch as Lady Gaga. The Cracker and Aquaria drama trying to emulate the Coco and Alyssa drama. What they're retreading isn't bad, but they just didn't really do any of it better than what was done in the past. Before we continue the video, I just want to talk about today's video sponsor, Aura. This past year has seen a number of high-profile data breaches, raising serious concerns about personal information security. Dell suffered a breach that exposed 3.9 million users' records, including a lot of sensitive personal information. United Health confirmed that 100 million of their users had their data stolen, the largest ever healthcare breach in the US. And finally, Ticketmaster had a really massive breach exposing 560 million customer records. But just a couple months ago, which is probably the most alarming, National Public Data announced that they'd suffered a major breach potentially impacting every American. The incident compromised over 2.9 billion records used for background checks. This includes critical personal information such as full names, addresses, dates of birth, phone numbers, and most importantly, social security numbers. It's been confirmed that members of these hacker groups have released personal information online for free. And if you haven't been taking your personal information seriously, now is the time to do so. Thankfully, I feel secure with today's video sponsor, Aura. Aura monitors your personal data, such as your social security number, across billions of data points, things such as the dark web or public court records, and it alerts you about any potential identity theft. Aura also provides $5 million in identity theft insurance in case the worst happens. And their service offers a lot of other features too, including real-time alerts for any data breaches, a VPN for secure browsing, data broker opt-outs for companies to stop selling your personal information, a password manager to help create and store strong passwords, and there's so much more too. I'm not leaving myself vulnerable to data breaches, so that's why I use Aura. If you're interested, you can go to aura.com/JackFed to try 2 weeks for free. That will be enough time for Aura to find out if any personal information has been exposed. Thank you so much to Aura, and now let's get back to the video. And let's do it again for season 11. Once again, we got a mini challenge with former queens coming back, a crazy celebrity entrance, which is much better than Christina's was, and another design challenge for the first episode, which at this point I would like to see again, but at this point in the show's run, I think a lot of people were getting very tired of it. And I think that's the big thing that brings this episode down for me. We've seen it all before, and we've honestly seen it better. And season 11 was around the point in Drag Race where queens were really starting to pick up on the fact that you can become a meme or just really successful from playing up to the camera, which we saw a lot here with Silky Nutmeg Ganache, who got completely buried in the edit this episode. The complete heel turn in the edit for her character from the first attitude check to the second one is insane to watch.
Attitude check! Yeah. Attitude check! See y'all gonna do me like that?
And while it set up Silky's storyline, it didn't really set up a lot else. It's definitely not the worst, but there's just not a lot I could say about it, and when it's season 11, I was hoping for some innovation. And much like with season 10 and 11, we get another issue with All Stars 9. We've done this exact format before, and I think it was done better the first time. It's a non-elimination All Stars season, so all of the queens are coming in, they do a reading challenge, the runway's really great, and then they do an original song, this one being Drag Queens Save the World. It just unfortunately comes after the all winners season of Drag Race where where they do the same format, so you're gonna compare the two, and this one just has less to offer, I would say. It's quality Drag Race, but the little stakes in the competition can already really be felt, and it just causes me to forget this premiere a lot of the time. These past 4 entries had the issue of being forgettable, even if on paper they had a lot of quality behind them. Some of these next entries coming up are objectively worse on just a TV show production standpoint, but I still find more entertainment out of them. With that being said, we have Season 1's premiere up next. Season 1 will always have a charm to it, even if we can agree that it's not the best TV show out there. The filter's really bad and we have no budget, but behind that, there's still the roots of Drag Race that have grown in. It's pretty remarkable that the format of Drag Race has barely changed at all in the 15 to 16 years that it's been on. Mini challenge, maxi challenge, runway, and lip sync for your life. That's how it was in episode 1, season 1, and that's still how it is today. I'm gonna have some bias towards this episode because of how much a fan I am, and it's honestly really hard for me to separate it. I see queens like Bibi Zahara Benet, Chanel, Tammy Brown, Ongina, Nina Flowers, and I see how far they've come since the show and just how far the show has come in general, and it brings just a different type of happiness and joy. So yeah, maybe the episode isn't the best quality, but it's where Drag Race started and I really appreciate that. Though it's still not gonna rank as high as some other episodes. In the same vein, we have season 2 up next, which basically does everything that season 1 did, but better. Basically all of season 1's points apply here too. It's really cool to see how far many of the queens have come. Some have fallen from grace. I'm not gonna be talking about Tyra anymore on this channel. Everything is a lot more recognizable now, with the workroom and the main stage being basically the sets that they use for the next couple seasons. And at this point in the show's run, Rue's whole vibe is just different. She's walking around the workroom and it feels way more like peers than it does like she's Mama Rue. So watching that back, it's super cool, but it's still just one design challenge, and you know, I can't really rank that high. The biggest example of entertainment over quality is up next with the All Stars 1 premiere. This episode to me is still super entertaining, even without the extremely chaotic Untucked. The queens being surprised into competing as teams is still such a terrible twist, and I don't think it should have ever happened, but to see them scramble and try to figure out how they're gonna pair outfits together and just work together in general, it's something really compelling to look back on. As much as people disliked her at the time, I think this one episode stint for Mimi Man First really bumped this episode up the list. Even if in some ways Yara was correct that they needed someone to go home first, Mimi's presence in the competition was something that I wanted to watch either flourish or crash and burn. It's just a little unfortunate that she had to take Pandora down with her. The entire episode revolves around Mimi and whether or not she should be here in the first place. And though it's sort of a tragic end, this one episode ride was definitely worth it. The reason it doesn't rank any higher is because this doesn't really do a good job selling you on the whole team's aspect. Walking the runway together and having to morph their outfits to fit a pair within like a 48-hour period, mind you. The end products, aside from like Latrilla, I just wasn't the biggest fan of. But speaking of Latrilla, it was really amazing to see their relationship blossom here, along with like Raven and Jujubee too. This is one of the best casts ever, and we got to see bits and pieces of that here, but with 2 queens going home each week, I feel like they just couldn't really live up to the potential. Only 8 of the 26 premieres to me are really forgettable or just outright bad. From here on out, I think each of the premieres is at least a 7 out of 10. And I want to start with season 16's premiere, which I might be controversial to put this low. It's not bad by any means. I think just at this point, I am a little fatigued on this whole talent show format and split premiere. You're gonna see where the other ones rank very soon, don't worry. I think season 16 has the worst of the split premiere formats. While other seasons have the queens all walking in at once, meeting each other, and then splitting into groups, this season and another have the queens fully split for each episode. And while I think split premieres are great to get to know the queens, if I'm just looking at these premieres, the split premiere just doesn't give me enough. I'm only seeing half the cast in this premiere, and the competition doesn't really get moving. The less payoff now is for the benefit of when all of the queens come together and you know them very well, and then it makes it a little more heartbreaking when each of them go home. So better payoff in the long run, but again, when we're just looking at episode 1 with half the cast, it's like judging act 1 of a movie. There were some standout talent shows like Saphira's and Q's, and we finally got a Break My Soul lip sync. I also like the Porch Improv too. I think that was really funny, but the reason it ranks 1 slot lower to me than season 14, which spoilers is up next, is Raid a Queen, which I just am not a huge fan of. I think they're doing a much better job in season 17, which I'll get to when I talk about that premiere. Raid a Queen in season 16 episode 1, it's the most standard that it could go. Like if they just did regular judging for the episode, I don't think anything would really change. If Plane's episode was episode 1, I think this would rank a lot higher because that had way more impact on what we were doing queen in the competition. But here it just kind of amounted to nothing, and it set up the precedent for the rest of the season that the twists were not really gonna do anything. Like I just touched on, we have season 14 up next, which just doesn't have Rated Queen, so that's kind of why I put it higher. But I think there were some other things that also bumped it up the list as well. It's all centered around Willow Pill, who I think has a really interesting episode arc. From her entrance, the queens were underestimating Willow, and I think the editors also wanted us to underestimate her too. Then we move on to this really fun photo shoot, one of my favorites ever, and we see Rue starting to really take a liking to Willow. And then we hit her amazing talent show where it all starts to make sense. Cornbread does a great job narrating this whole journey, being the most vocal one to underestimate her, and then coming out as a really big supporter of her in the end. I think it would have been a perfect cap off to the episode for Willow to win, but Cornbread also had an amazing performance too, so you know, either one. This little arc gave it a little more substance than season 16, so that's why it ranks slightly higher. Season 7 is up next, and part of me wants to move it further down the list because a lot of the critiques of the time haven't held up the best. The theme was born naked, and all of the queens had to serve a nude illusion look, and someone like Violet was critiqued for not really giving a lot of body, which I'm not sure would honestly be said today. There's a couple reasons why I have it ranked up higher than other premieres. I honestly do like the category of born naked with this whole nude illusion look. It's honestly much harder to pull off than people think. This episode sets up a lot of the characters for the later season, two of the biggest being Katya and Violet. Katya from the jump was already like the narrator of the season, and I think she had a lot of time to shine in this episode. And as I'm looking how I rank this list, I think I am a sucker for when the winner of the season gets a win in the first episode and is really built up. I think that makes the premieres have a bigger payoff when looking back. Not to mention, one of the biggest mini challenges that they've ever done, the spring to fall fashion looks, was in this episode. Like Katya said, it could have easily been a full challenge if they really wanted to. It got the season off on the right foot, and especially with Violet's presentation, it got her winner's journey on the right foot too. And we're back to the talent shows with All Stars 4. This one's pretty hard to rank for me because I think the episode is good and the talent show overall has a pretty high quality to it. The judging is just like what takes me out completely with this episode. Mo and Trinity I think did a great job, but Gia should have definitely been up there. The placements of this episode started to reveal who they were really wanting to prioritize in the season. Even with that, there were some great moments like the reading challenge and just the fact that they were really dismantling who could be on All Stars. Literally coming back after setting up what they had in All Stars 1, it was great to see. The cast dynamics were also really good, and having Farrah mess up like that, it's a pretty interesting storyline to follow for the first episode. I just have one last thing to say.
People hating undercover. You're all about.
We now move on to season 17's premiere, which I'm gonna safely put right here. This episode and up are all episodes that I would actively seek out because I really enjoyed them, and I can definitely see this one moving up, but it depends on how the rest of the season plays out. First of all, this is easily the funniest, best intro that they've ever done. I always love when Drag Race references itself, and this was just like Easter egg after Easter egg and homage after homage. It was incredible. And stupid, which I think is best served when it's in a parody form like this. It was such an incredible way to start the season, and it got me excited for the rest of the episode. I get good vibes from this season already. I think the cast is very, very diverse in terms of talent, and they're all really cool. We got another talent show, and I think it was good. I really, really liked Susie's a lot. And if I have to be honest, they made Rated Queen very interesting, and I wouldn't mind seeing it back again in this form. The girls brought out the strategy, making alliances, voting based off of who they want to either lip sync against or who they want to keep out of the bottom. If they're gonna keep doing these split premiere talent shows, I think this is a great format to do it in. The new stage is just eye candy. I wasn't really sure how I would like it, but after these first couple episodes and seeing how they were doing the lighting, it looks incredible. Katie was fine, yeah, and I thought Women's World kind of brought down the episode a little bit, but this premiere is a really strong start to a season that I think is going to be one for the books. All Stars 6 is up next, and the best way I can describe this season is setting up the dominoes that are going to fall later. We get the first theming of redemption that drives basically every storyline of the season. Queens like Raja O'Hara, who I've done a full video on, have a full 180 edit from their first depiction. She's just such a positive force on the season, and we see her prove herself in this first episode alone. The casting seemed very random when you first go into the season, but how they were telling the storylines in this first episode alone, the editors understood where each of the queens came from, but they weren't afraid to make a new path for them if they really needed to. Another example would be Kylie, who was basically reintroducing herself to the entire Drag Race fandom. The editors both knew that she was an older queen introducing herself in that way, but also just introducing herself as a woman again. They gave her entrance on the season the right amount of impact and space to become this monumental moment. The vibes of All-Star 6 will always be so fun to me, and it's one of my favorite seasons of all time. Still though, it's a very standard format, another reading challenge into a talent show, so as much as I can analyze the little things, the big picture lands it here. And right after 6, we have All-Stars 7. I don't want to touch on this one too much just because of recent events and how it may still trigger people. All of the queens came together to form such a tight bond and amazing product, and it really felt like we were catching up with a bunch of people who we hadn't seen in a long time. It ranks around here because I don't think it's one of the strongest episodes of the season. It's a good start, but I think it gets blown out of the water by Snatch Game the next week, which I think could have easily been the premiere episode instead. From the bottom of my heart, rest in peace to the Vivienne. She was such an inspiration to so many people, and it's such a tragic loss. She made the season, and just this premiere episode alone, so much better. Just outside of the top 10, we have season 15, which again, I am counting episodes 1 and 2 because they aired on the same night. If you want to know how I would count this episode if it was just season 1, it would be at the bottom right above season 13. But because they are ranked together, it bumps it up a lot. Once again, we have the photo shoots, the talent shows, and it's a pseudo split premiere, but they meet before they do the talent show. And the show's all in one, which I honestly like better, even though it is kind of hard to keep track of from time to time. There's a lot more room to breathe and learn these characters as we go on with the first 2 episodes. Irene was a very interesting first boot, especially after we got to know her so much because she got so much screen time, but they were also setting up a lot of the other things like the twins dynamic with Mistress, the legacy of Sasha Colby, Anitra's talent show, and her organic rise. I thought they did just enough with this premiere to differentiate it from any of the other seasons that have done similar formats. The way they carried everything out, it makes the season stick out. It's almost similar to 17 where, you know, they have the same format basically, but they're doing little things to make sure that each season is different. And that's why I think 14 and 16 falter, because they didn't really do that. Season 4 is up next, which I originally had much lower on the list, but after rewatching it, there's just so many iconic moments. Sharon's outfit and the way it was celebrated meant a lot to Drag Race going forward. Just the post-apocalypse runway in general, I think it was a really cool category to do, especially in a design challenge form. It gave us things like the hot potato couture that Jiggly Caliente did, or LaShawn Beyond or the Princess having really strong runways even though they went pretty early after. And this is on top of the slime photo shoot where queens were slipping and sliding and falling, and the fun little excursion of former queens coming back as zombies holding fabrics for the other queens to get. It's a really campy fun time, and though the vibes of the season definitely take a downward turn with how the edit kind of portrays a lot of the queens, for this one episode I think we got a really enjoyable stupid time. Keeping with this stupid campy fun of the golden era, we have season 6. One of the most iconic photo shoots, some of the most iconic entrances ever. I will say there is a severe lack of Bianca Del Rio. Dela, Adore, Gia, and Laganja definitely hold down the fort to make a lot of the entertaining moments of this episode, but when the start of the season isn't there, you kind of catch yourself missing her just a little bit. This was the first time they ever did a split premiere, and the only time they ever did a design challenge for a split premiere. And I think it played to the personalities of the queens because we got to know them in the workroom as opposed to just their drag persona. You warm up to queens like Adore really fast because even if she isn't really getting the hang of the competition very well, there's something that's just so endearing about her, and that really shines through. It's one of those episodes where if I show someone who doesn't know anything about Drag Race, they'll probably be entertained at the very least or get hooked from there. Season 3's premiere is up next, and this is one that I've always really enjoyed. It takes the design concept from the first 2 seasons, but basically just makes it Project Runway. We get to see the queens go out to a thrift store and use materials that they find there, and they were doing this all on a budget. So much about this challenge I don't think we're ever gonna see again. With how the fandom is and how they handle spoilers, we can't see the queens out in public before the show starts. Having an actual thrift store in there is really interesting with actual people who are working at it. Like nowadays, unless it was a big thrift store that like sponsored the show, I don't think they would give them this much free advertisement. Season 3 is where they really started to recognize how campy their show is and how they could really play into that. There were elements in the first 2 seasons, but I think the energy was a lot lower, while in season 3 it's starting to pick up. I don't want to mention her too much, but Shangela coming back in this season was also a gag. Her popping out of the box has become really iconic, and then immediately landing in the bottom again for another design challenge is really funny. That lip sync was a hot mess, and if you ranked it lower because of it, I totally understand, but I get some sadistic enjoyment out of it, and it started to set the precedent of drag not being a contact sport, which wasn't really fully paid off until a couple episodes later, but you saw that it really bothered RuPaul in this episode. And it's again another episode where the winner of the season wins their first challenge in this episode and starts to set up their winner's storyline. Raja's was extremely strong here, winning both the mini and the maxi challenge, and I just have such a soft spot for Raja, so I gotta rank the episode pretty high. If season 3 was starting to pick up the energy, I think season 5 is where they really perfected it. And it also continues the vibes from season 4 being a campy, stupid time, especially especially the bus scene, which may or may not be helping it rank this high. This premiere is just the start to basically everything that I love about season 5. You get introduced to Alaska Talks as individuals and how much of a powerhouse they're gonna be. You see how quirky of a character that Jinx is, and most importantly, it sets up the Coco and Alyssa storyline from the start. The entrance alone, it bumps it up so much. This is probably the most iconic photo shoot that they've ever done. It's still constantly referenced and joked about. Whether it be Serena's shoot, Alyssa falling, Detox's look, it has really stood the test of time as a mini challenge of all things. Season 5 is a carefully crafted, nearly flawless storyline, and there's a reason that I show people this season first every time. The characters of this season are just unmatched. I mean, even early on characters like Serena Chacha or Lanesha Sparks or Jade Jolie get to shine here. And as someone who edits all of their videos, I really love the edit of this season because it's so bad. The amount of times that they use the same soundbite of Jade Jolie laughing, it almost makes it like an inside joke for them. It's Drag Race at its messiest, but I think it's also at its best in season 5, and I think the premiere is a really great example.
I just like to be fabulous and fun.
Comfortable with your non-tuck and they got two together.
Awesome. I'm serving the judges up red sequins in your face.
All Stars 3 is up next, and I think this is probably the strongest foot that anyone has ever stepped on. What? Huh? The All Stars 3 premiere gave us such a promising start to a season that did end up bad, but after the monumental previous All Star season, the expectations were high, and I think this premiere really met them. It does what often sequels do, which is up the stakes. It's the same cash prize, same reading challenge, same talent show, but with the added twist that Bibi Zahara Benet is coming back, which is a crazy moment even today if you think about it. The winner of the first season coming back for an All Stars to see if she can still compete, I think is a really genius twist that they did. And I'm glad that it was met with the right amount of impact, unlike other things like Isis coming back on Canada or like Pangina competing on UK. They understood what it meant for her to be here, and it raised the competition in a really interesting way. Beyond that, I mean, the reading challenge was great, the talent show, Aja's talent show, are you kidding me? There was not a bad one in the bunch. By today's standards, Morgan and Chi Chi would definitely be safe. Aja was the one to really redefine the bitch track and also jumping off the box, obviously. And nowadays, though I want probably less bitch tracks in my talent shows, there's no doubt in my mind that this is a top 3 or even top 1 talent show of all time. And because this was only the second time that they did this, there was still a lot of variety. We had Trixie and Thorgy playing their instruments, Vandelacreme doing burlesque, whatever the hell Milk was doing, Velcro is a talent, and it's all capped off with the Anaconda lip sync, which is probably the highlight of the season. Laughter is infectious, and Michelle dying at Vandelacreme is one of my favorite moments of Drag Race. This next entry I didn't really expect to rank as high, but I really just liked this challenge and everything that they did. Season 8's premiere is a tribute to basically all of Drag Race before, because it's the 100th episode and Derek Barry walking in was the 100th queen. It was another design challenge, but they spun it on its head by giving each of the queens a category from the past. And while it's not the most fair, like some people got to work with fabrics while other people had to work with unconventional materials, it really encapsulated how far the show has come and how many amazing challenges there have been. And speaking of encapsulating things and how I talked about iconic photo shoots like in season 5, I really like this photo shoot that they did with all the previous winners. A couple of them being disgraced, and also there being a circus clown because Bianca Del Rio couldn't make it. It's so cool to have each of the queens come in and basically see how they're gonna fit among the winners. And with the perspective that we have nowadays, this is one of the last times that all of the winners could be in a room together, not only for the actions of some of the winners, but also just the expansion of Drag Race post season 8. This was the last season that they did on Logo, and then after this, All Stars 2 came out, they moved to VH1, eventually Drag Race UK, and then all of the rest of the franchises. It was the beginning of the end of one of my favorite eras of Drag Race, when it was a lot more simple. Everyone kind of knew everyone, and it was a niche show to just appreciate, and I'm so glad about the expansion, but there's just such a charm to a premiere like this. Like I said a while ago, I would actively seek out any of these premieres just to watch for entertainment, but all of the entries up to this point I think more so serve as a piece for the season, making them almost harder to judge as standalone episodes. These last 4 entries though are standalone and are just quality episodes of television that you can watch basically in a vacuum. And to start, we have an episode from a season that's not very good, but this episode alone shows how good of a season it could have been. This is one of the only times that I think I would ever rank an All Stars 5 moment this high on a list. The All All Stars 5 premiere revolves completely around the storyline between Derek and India. There's a lot of context from off the show where they had beef. India called one of Derek's husbands a pig in a wig, things like that. And Derek has always been a very confrontational person. They bring up the drama a lot in this first episode and nothing really gets resolved. So you really see this having the potential of going really far into the season as a storyline. But as the episode goes on and you see Derek bomb the talent show and India have a really good talent show, you start to realize, oh wait, okay, I know what's gonna go on. While at the end, India isn't the one to end up eliminating Derek, Derek still experiences a ton of comeuppance. Going from the amazing confrontational Derek to then having to like put her foot in her mouth and compliment India and just kind of kiss up to her, the whole feud basically gets flipped on its head with how the placements work out. I'm definitely not a big fan of India or writing her off as the person who was in the right in this situation by any means. This episode is just a really interesting example of how the power dynamics shifted from one person to another. And that's not even getting to the other things that I really did like about this episode. I mean, the reading challenge was really great because Jujubee was there, and we had a brand new format with the lip sync assassin, which by now I think a lot of people are tired of, but it was brand new here. And then they brought in Evie Oddly, who was the newest winner of the Drag Race franchise up to that point when they filmed, and both her and India delivered one of the best lip syncs that we've seen in a while. The drama was there, the format felt fresh, and basically all of that disappeared within the next couple weeks. But for this one condensed storyline, it was told pretty dang well. For slots 2 and 3, I keep flip-flopping between these two seasons, and I think right now I am going to put season 12 here. Mostly because it still falls victim to only having half the cast up to this point in this episode. To this day, this is one of the only episodes that's been fully released to the RuPaul's Drag Race YouTube channel. It seems like they're very proud of this episode, and they should be. It's definitely the entrance of a new era. They went back to a split premiere for the first time in 6 seasons, and for the first challenge, they're doing girl group numbers, which is super cool at the time. While a lot of these things are very standard Drag Race nowadays, this was the first season to do it. And it's also the first season to have flat out cash prizes too, which I think was a big change as well. As much as I like Fierce Drag Jewels, I don't think they can really compare to $5,000. They brought back the runway mini challenge from season 7, and they had to serve 5 looks in this episode: entrance, spring, fall, performance, and then their runway for the episode. I'm That Bitch as a song was such a unique surprise, and all of them killed it. I remember watching this episode freshman year of college with my friends who'd never seen Drag Race, and as soon as Brita started, everyone was kind of taken aback because they didn't think that they would be as good as they were. And though she's controversial now, I think Nicki Minaj did an incredible job as a guest judge. She had some great critiques, really volleyed with the rest of the judges, and the show played her up as the monumental guest judge that she was. The episode was such a fresh breath of air, and overall it felt super grand. These queens were being put through the ringer at the start, and at the end they were celebrated with a top 2 lip sync instead. It's one of those seasons that got it so correct right off the bat that they're still trying to recreate it nowadays. And speaking of premieres that felt really grand, All Star 2's premiere is just, it's on another level. This was the revival of All Stars after it lay dormant because of the flop that was All Stars 1. And if they wanted to keep doing All Stars, they had to hit it out of the park with this cast. And every single one of these queens delivered. They were all such powerhouses, and each of these queens really felt like they could take the crown. They had storylines from their previous seasons carry over, and that led to some incredible payoff on this season. The one queen that could be seen slightly out of place was Tatiana. A lot of her reads came down to her being like a fan or being the one that's going to be sent home first. And then we get to that talent show with her spoken word performance, and she proves all of them wrong. There's also the new format that's revealed being a top 2 lip sync instead of a bottom 2, and the queens would be eliminating each other, which would be the gag of the season. The competition was depicted to be super stiff. It was cutthroat from the start, with Roxy eliminating Coco, who was one of her friends. And in between it all, we got some incredible performances from some of the greatest queens that we've seen on the show. There's only one episode that beats it out in my eyes, and that is season 9's Oh My Gaga. To me, this episode ranks so high because it transcends just being an episode of Drag Race. There's still the competition aspects that are there, like Nina won this week. She showcased the type of drag that we haven't really seen on the show up to this point, and that being celebrated, that's incredible. But beyond that, just this episode in general is such an example of queer media and how it can really affect people. Lady Gaga walks into the workroom and surprises all of the queens. It's one of the most viral moments from the show, and there's just such a candid discussion of how much her art has affected each of the queens and how she's an inspiration, and the way she judges this episode and treats all the queens with such respect, and how the queens respect her right back when they wear her outfits on their runways. There's just such a warmth in the celebration of Lady Gaga's art and how much it's affected the queer community in general. I can't properly put it into words right now, and I don't want to go so far to say that this is Drag Race's magnum opus. It's just such a real example of how one person can have an effect on other people or a larger group or community. It's beautiful, it's one of those feel-good episodes, and it easily tops my list. After looking it over, Drag Race premieres are pretty damn good. If you disagreed with any of the placements, that's okay. Let me know in the comments where you would put these episodes. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon with another video.